Potentially pull some of the workers from the Robinson mine, because this is a big civil project, so it's very similar to the mining that's happening right now. We're moving dirt and rocks. I mean, that is what this project is, and doing some underground blasting. So this is a big civil project, which is very similar to the Robinson mine. As far as workforce, in addition to the community here, how we house that hasn't been fully worked out, but the goal is that we would be good neighbors and partners and potentially upgrade some of the trailer camps here, so that a lot of people that do construction and travel from job to job, they bring their fifth wheel and they like to hook it up, and that's what they do. So if we can help as part of the community to improve those trailer parks that then the community could use for vacation travelers and campers and stuff like that, that would be something that would be good. I know that there's a lot of motels, hotels, and I was approached by one of the hotels downtown. We would like to obviously put people in the hotels in the available space first. When we don't know the total number of people we need yet, so it's really hard to say whether we would need a man camp or not. And we did get questions about man camps. As I described earlier, we have to be as broad as we can with the FERC licensing project. So we've included a man camp in the potential need because it's easier to take it away. We would never be able to go back in 5 years and after they've done all the environmental studies and say, oh, we forgot to add a man camp that 200 people are going to be in. It's much easier to say, we don't need that man camp. It's not going to be part of the project. If we did do a man camp, this map, and apparently our first preliminary application stated that it would be over on the Duck Creek side. There's no way that it makes practical sense that you would do a man camp on the Duck Creek side. The impact to the community back there would just be way too extreme and nobody would want to stay back there. The more likely result is that you would do it here in Steptoe where the resources are where gas stations and foods and restaurants and services are. So that's something that we would work with the county on. As far as, again, increasing maybe one of the trailer camps to accommodate for a higher density of population during construction. I got asked a kind of funny question yesterday, which was, we heard you're building a 4-lane highway down Duck Creek. Well, there's a 2-lane highway that runs from 93 from Canada down to Mexico. Why would we put a 4-lane highway in the middle of Duck Creek? That doesn't make practical sense. So the answer to that is no, we're not going to build a 4-lane highway anywhere in the state. But we have talked with the county, we have talked with the road division, and we did originally propose doing what's referred to as a development service agreement, where the project would be responsible for any impact on the roads and other accommodations. So the idea of a development service agreement or some kind of agreement with the county roads is that to the degree that we adversely affect any road, we are responsible for improving that road to above standards from when we started. And on the Duck Creek side specifically, where we turn off of Duck Creek, it's about 3.5 miles or 3.2 miles of dirt road after the asphalt if you're going south on the road. I do expect that if we get to construction, we would want to pave that portion of road, the 3.2 miles or whatever, to the turnoff, and that would be an obligation of ours to pay for that county road for that improvement. And it would be staying within the parameters of the existing road, so it wouldn't be an expansion, but it should be an improvement. And again, on the Duck Creek side with construction, if there was any road damage, the project would be responsible for repairing, upgrading, and fixing that. So those have been some of the major questions. The other one is the economic aspect of it. And the flyer that you guys have on the table has a highlight from, we commissioned Zions Bank, their public finance group, to do a socioeconomic impact report for this project. This is just a sampling of that report because we only have it in draft form. And it's in draft because we still just don't know a lot of the details of the project. But in the flyer, it takes into account some basic principles that are state-driven, and that is, first of all, there's a capital cost of the project. How much does it cost? So we put $2.3 million in there.
Billion.
$2.3 billion, excuse me. $2.3 billion. It's a big number. So we put $2.3 billion. Then the state has a renewable energy plan that's regulated by the governor, and it has a structure set up to it that you have to pay 150% of prevailing wages. You have to do all these things to qualify, but it's one of the items that the state offers. And this project would qualify that for that governor's state tax credit for the first 20 years. So we've assumed that. Then we've assumed that the assessed value of the project, like every other project in the state, regardless of what it is assessed at 35% of the value. And that then drives the taxable amount. In the summary that we have here, you have all the taxing entities. You have the school district, the county, and the different parties that are, maybe it's in there, maybe not. Pam shook her head. Or Dan. So anyway, the bottom line, the punchline is that for the first 20 years that the project is paying taxes during that tax abatement period, it's about $265 million of new taxes that it will pay into the state. And it's about $144 million of that 265 that stays here in White Pine County. So the economic impact is that this does create tremendous economic diversity for the county for the next 100 years. We're only going out 20 years because that's what, again, the sample did by Zions. And you can just extrapolate going from years 21 to years 80 or 90 or whenever it goes. And the whole intention of that is that this creates really good economic diversity for the county with pretty minimal impact in the end. It'll have some job creation during construction. It will have a few jobs after it's built. I think it's 25 roughly full-time jobs. But it's really the tax revenue. And I would make the argument that in addition to the dark sky attraction for people here and the railroad and the bike trails and the experience, that this could be one of those attraction points to bring people here to the community to say, we are really helping the state to transition from conventional fossil fuels to renewable energy. And this is a showpiece of how the country can operate with large-scale energy storage, with renewable energy, and it will be a showpiece that everybody can be proud of. The other question that we have asked, and then I'll open it up for questions. The other question that we ask is, well, how is this going to affect us in my utility rates and when I turn on my electricity, and how does Mount Wheeler participate in this project? We are transitioning, this is a battery. It's a giant energy storage, so we're not a generator. We don't produce power. It has to get power from someplace else, and then it sends power out. It does that on very high voltage transmission lines, not the ones that come into the town, but the ones that go, part of the Greenlink North, Greenlink East-West project, and north and south throughout the state. So this is very high voltage lines. Mount Wheeler will participate because the project's going to need power to run, and it will benefit by having that here. We can't take a section of this project and give it to Mount Wheeler to then give to everybody else because it's just at too high of a voltage for them to transfer. But ultimately, through solar and renewable, the community will benefit from that from a state perspective. So those were some of the questions, and I'll open the floor up to any other questions unless, did I miss anything, Matthew? Yes, sir.
The Gardner Company owns this development, right?
Yes.
Yeah. How do you expect to sell bonds or stock? Or this is a for-profit company, right?
Yeah. Do you want me to take that question?
Yeah.
So the question was, who is financing this project, and who, and what's the intention of it? And the question was the Gardner Company. So by way of background, I can introduce myself. My name is Luigi Resta. I'm the president of R+ Energies, and we're based in Salt Lake City. We are a renewable energy utility development company. So we build power plants that are renewable. We are owned by the Gardner Company, which is a second-generation, family-owned real estate office out of Salt Lake City. And they're a fantastic family. They're really committed to the communities that they work in. And at R+ Energies, we have 40 projects in 17 states that encompass solar plus battery, wind, and our pump storage portfolio of these projects. And the question is, how are we going to finance this project and what the end goal is? I wanted to give a little background of who the Gardners were and where the money's coming from. So they're financing the development of the project. When it gets to the $2 billion number, they have no ability to do that. The idea is that once the project is approved, engineered, licensed, and that the utilities would take an interest in it, and it could be NV Energy or it could be a different utility, because really, as everybody here knows, you guys are part of like a hub to a lot of different utilities with the Robinson Summit substation out there. And you have Greenlink West coming in, you have Greenlink North, you have, what's the other transmission line? SWIP North. There's all these transmission systems coming through here that touch to different utilities. So in the end, the goal is to have a utility take an interest, want this project, and ultimately they will probably buy the development that we've done and end up owning and operating the project.
So another question about the rock formation. You're worried about the stability of the ground? Is that what?
So the question was about the rock formation and what our concern is. And I'm not an engineer, I'm a developer and runner. Our director of engineering is there, but I can simply answer the question. It's a couple of things. One, we want to make sure that the rock is really hard and tight, because we're drilling a vertical shaft that goes 2,000 feet down, and we want to use that rock as the conduit so that we don't have to line it with metal or concrete. So that's one thing that we're looking for, is the quality and density of the rock. The second thing is, once we get down that 2,000 feet, we're going to have a giant powerhouse that's underground, that's 2,000 feet underground. It's going to be 10 times the size of this room. And we need to make sure that structurally that room won't cave in the event of a fault. Then you have the tail race that comes out, the low pressure pipe. Again, we're looking for making sure that the quality of that rock doesn't need to be lined, because it adds costs, and that dictates that. The other question that was raised is the faults, and the earthquake faults, and how do we design for that? So part of this exploration work is to understand how often those faults happen, how large those faults are, and then how do we design engineering-wise to accommodate for any shifting of the ground. So that's really the intention.
You using a pipe in that tunnel?
Well, that's what we're looking. That's what the geotech work will determine. Ideally, we don't have to use pipes because it adds costs.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yes, my question is, how do you keep the water from freezing?
Well, it's constantly moving, right?
So
It's
the water won't freeze up on top of the mountain?
Well, it doesn't really matter if it freezes. Think about two bathtubs that are moving, the water from one bathtub to the other. If the upper and we know it gets really cold up at 8,500 feet, and specifically on that side of the range with the wind and everything. If the water on the upper reservoir freezes, which we assume it would, it'll be the top 6 inches, foot, 2 feet, 3 feet. The water below it will still stay in liquid form and be able to move up and down. So we would end up with an ice cap top, but the bottom of the water moving. And it is expected that water would fill all the way up and deplete on a daily basis.
There are projects around the world with much higher altitudes, 10,000 feet and up, pump storage projects like this.
Yes, sir.
Will you tell us how much you paid the county for the water rights? And another question, are y'all affiliated with the wind generating company in Roscoe, Texas, and Snyder County, Texas?
First question, how much did we pay for the water rights? I have to jog my memory. I said I have 40 projects in 16 states. But what we negotiated with the county was we're paying $50,000 a year, if I'm not mistaken, for the next 5 years, just for kind of a reservation fee to make sure that we're helping to cover the legal expenses. In the event that the project moves forward and we use that 5,000 acre feet, and during construction, I think we agreed to $250,000 for that water that we would fill, and that's a license, so that's a one-time kind of payment. And then, is that right? And then we do have an option to purchase 750 acre feet, and I and I apologize, I don't have the numbers, but it's somewhere in that range. And it was marked, there was an appraisal done for the water rights, and we paid, the purchase price was all based on the appraisal of the water rights. Did that answer your question on that?
Yeah.
And then on the wind projects, no, we are not affiliated with those wind projects. I did in my past work on a 600 megawatt wind project in the Texas Panhandle, but it wasn't those ones, and so I don't know about those ones.
I'm concerned with the lake in the immediate vicinity, even this startup would probably take what water's there for those houses. Are you going to be bonded if you take the water away, or if you can deepen the wells, or whatever we have to do to have water?
The question was around water rights, and specifically, I think in the Steptoe Valley, in that region, directly around the Gondor substation, is that correct?
Yeah.
Excuse me. Again, we are working with Basin Engineering and PTOW, and I believe that most of the folks in here work with Basin on the water and some of your drilling. We would have test wells, and we want to make sure that you don't have to deepen your well to get the water that you need. So we will make every precaution and guarantee that that does not occur, that there is ways that we can drill down deeper to make sure that your water tables are not affected. And I know water table movement is a big issue here, so that is a discussion we've had with Basin and with PTOW on the hydrology.
Are we going to have a bond, or are we going to be bonded for it, or?
We haven't, the question is, will we bond for making sure that doesn't happen? I don't think we've gotten to that level of conversation, but if that's a requirement, we would not be opposed to that. Again, the worst thing would be that this project moves forward and you can't turn on your tap and take a shower.
Well, it's continually dropping here in the last 10, 15 years anyway.
Right, well, and as we've mentioned on multiple occasions, this is not needing continuous water. We will fill it up, and then, and once it's full, the water usage is very low, so. I mean, these are numbers that I've been told in the past, but the equivalent of filling up the lower reservoir is about 8 pivots for 1 year of filling up, and then on an annual basis, it's close to like 1 pivot worth of water. Yes, ma'am?
Right, so you mentioned that there would be visitors that would come to see this marvel. Will you have tourism? Will you have people that will be able to go inside of it once it's completed? I mean, like on scale, like say Hoover Dam or another dam. Like, I mean, it's not a dam, but do you know what I'm saying? Will we be able to go in and check it out?
That, did everybody hear that question? She did a good job of projecting, but the question was, how will visitors see the project once it's built, generally speaking, and comparing it to the Hoover Dam? So we actually do have a videographer documenting this, because we do feel that this is comparable and on the scale of a Hoover Dam type project, and because it's 10 years, we want to be able to put together a documentary in 10 years of everything that happened, you know, both the positive and the adverse of the project. To answer the question about specific visitor presentation, I mean, I think one is that the train and the dark sky, you'll be able to go over the lower reservoir and, you know, maybe stop the train there and see the stars and the reflection of the reservoir, and you can describe that this lower reservoir is supporting a 1,000 megawatt pump storage project that is being supported by solar. That's one thing. Visitation into the powerhouse underground, that might be a little tough because this will be a FERC, NERC, you know, the security ramifications of that would be pretty high. So I don't know, but it, you know, it's something that's worth considering is, does it make sense to have a visitor center somewhere in town that people can go into, see photographs of the construction, see what the powerhouse looks like, touch and push things and see the generation? That is something that would be a great addition, and, you know, again, a project like this would absolutely support building a building or renovating a building to create a visitor center like that.
Question. Now,
Go ahead.
okay, it takes energy to make energy. Now, Mount Wheeler would be supplying the energy needed to do the actual pumping to your upper reservoir?
No.
Where would that energy come from?
Do you have more of the question? Because I'll
Yes.
repeat it.
Okay, it takes a certain amount of energy to move the water up to the upper reservoir. Once there, it comes down and runs generators. What is your net energy gain out of the whole operation? Because you're on the negative side going up, putting the water up, and on the positive side coming down. Second question, with the number of acre feet that you've got in the reservoir, how long does it take to drain that reservoir for power?
So it's being designed for 8 hours of storage. So the question was what's the storage, that we call the storage duration. 8 hours of storage, so that would get for example, it might be turned on at when the solar starts to go down, 4 p.m. until 12 midnight. You could generate full power, or you could generate at partial power for a longer period of time. So it's being sized for 8 hours. The round trip efficiency, like I said, it's basically a giant battery that uses water. So there is efficiency loss. You don't get energy for free, right? So it's about 80% efficient. So there's a 20% loss in that round trip cycle of pumping up, generating down. Some of it comes from friction in the pipes. Some of it comes from the equipment. But in spite of that loss, these types of projects are extremely valuable to utilities simply because of the ability to move that energy, store it, that electricity, store it, and then have it available on demand. Even though they've lost 20% of it, it's extremely flexible, on-demand power. It keeps the lights on and keeps the grid stable, so it's worth it for that round trip.
And can you guys hear me okay if I don't use the mic? Yes? You can hear me back there? So additionally, and again, we're talking about charging the pump storage hydro project. The intention and the direction that the utilities are all going, and I'll let Matthew continue, but is to use renewable energy, and that's mostly in the form of solar and wind. Solar power right now, the Gemini project that's being built down in southern Nevada is selling power at 2.4 cents for 20 years. 2.4 cents for 20 years. Wind is in the same range, that you're at the 2.5 cents fixed rate for 20 years. So you have really low cost energy that's being produced by solar and wind right now. But what solar and wind doesn't have, because it's intermittent, the sun comes over, you don't have solar power, the wind stops, you don't have wind power, that's a problem for everybody. So they can, we refer to that as energy, right? So generation is instantaneous power. Capacity is the duration that power is available to us to turn on lights. So you have two items. Energy, instantaneous. Power is the duration. What this project does is allow for that duration to be extended from cheap energy that's solar and wind. And so the loss of it, the 120% or 20% loss, 20% loss, is really not too big of a fiscal impact because the cost of that electricity is so low.
And the other question about Mount Wheeler, so the pumping would come from the same source that's using the generation, basically, provided over that 500 kV system, going into Robinson Summit, coming down to the plant, back and forth. For Mount Wheeler, we do need to buy power locally to keep the lights on in the powerhouse. We can't really extract that power from our own generators to use for the air conditioning and the lights, and it's a big load. We estimate 3 megawatts on a continuous basis, which is, I think, is pretty much close to 10%. Would be a 10% gain for Mount Wheeler as far as customer base. So we'll be a customer of theirs.
A big customer, 10% of all of their load. I think question back there, and then we'll get
I
to
have two questions. One of all the 130 projects you've got throughout the country, how many use underground water to be pumped? Because the ones I've looked at, they're either coming from a lake or a river constantly. So that's the first question. The second question, when you get into Duck Creek, the 3.2 miles at the end of the pavement to build the road to the reservoir. A lot of miners here. That's pretty steep country, large pieces of equipment. A lot of earth's gotta be moved. A lot of private property between the end of that 3.2 miles to the reservoir, which is gonna be approximately 2 times the size of Cave Lake. Are private property owners buying in on this? Because that's not all BLM or Forest Service property up there. It's gonna be huge. And is there one road going through there or 2 roads? I seen one drawing, it was one road going up, and I seen another one, now there's another road farther south.
You had 2 questions, and the second one made me lose track of the first one. Let me answer the second one first.
Okay.
On the Duck Creek side, and maybe I was, the 3.2 miles that we're talking about is the flat part of Duck Creek where it's dirt currently. So the asphalt ends, and if you keep going south on the dirt, it's that first 3 miles. So we're not getting into any of the hills that go up. And that's the county road that we were talking about. When we cross to get up to the upper reservoir, when we cross Duck Creek right here, there is a private landowner that is down here. And then the rest of this is BLM property, and there's an existing Jeep trail that goes up there. We would largely be following that existing Jeep trail to the upper reservoir, and it would be one road. So one road, pavement, and then one road up to the upper reservoir. And like I said, there is a private landowner here, and I think there's another one somewhere in here.
They're over here.
But we haven't bought any land, we don't have any agreements with any of them, because we're trying to stay entirely on BLM property, because we have the pad, the SF-299, and it would just be easier. So that was, I know, your second question, so hopefully I answered that.
On that Jeep trail, that's a Jeep trail.
It will be improved, and it
UTV.
will.
You're talking earth-moving equipment, dozers, scrapers. So that Jeep trail is gonna go half the size of this room. The equipment I've seen in my 27 years of mining, you can take out a Jeep trail that fast with a dozer.
That would become an improved road that would have to get equipment up there, large equipment, and once it got up to the top, it would largely stay there. As a miner, you know, you're not gonna move equipment up and down. But that road would be improved, it would be graded, pretty large. After construction, we would probably reclaim, I forget the specific word, but reduce that to a manageable size. It would be like for a single truck to kind of go up there just to do maintenance on it, because once the reservoir's built, we don't need to go up there with heavy equipment anymore. So we wouldn't leave a 2-lane highway going up the side of the mountain. It just doesn't benefit the project after construction. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that's fine.
And what was your first question?
The first question is, of all your 130 these type projects in the United States, how many are using groundwater to supply and make the operation
I'll let
work?
Matthew answer that one.
Yeah, so there are 42 operating in the US. Most of them are on existing lakes, reservoirs. This new generation of projects that are being pursued in the United States, most of them are of this type, which is called closed loop. So you're not using an existing body of water. So the sourcing is, in most cases, going to have to be groundwater unless it can be piped in from somewhere else. And so you're right, there aren't, of the 130 operating around the world, I don't know if there are any that are closed loop, like the new generation of projects that we're talking about that would use. That's why, you know, when you look for a pump storage site, especially a closed loop one, you have to know where the water is going to come from. At least have a good idea, otherwise you're not going anywhere. So the advantage we had in this particular area was that existing groundwater right that the county has. If not for that, we wouldn't be standing here, you know, there'd be no source.
Well, and I think everybody can acknowledge that damming run of the rivers is probably not going to happen too much anymore with hydro plants and creating new reservoirs and new dams that have hydro plants. And water is becoming scarcer and scarcer. So one way to do it is with a closed loop project like this, where you have an upper and lower reservoir that's a closed loop, and you fill it and you have some loss.
One question, you quoted a figure of so many $1 million of tax revenue to the county. And I'm not following, because this is mostly on federal land, as you said, correct? So you don't own the property, the feds own the land, correct?
Yes.
So there would be no property tax on that land. The only thing that would be taxable are physical assets that you have. Now, they're not gonna amount to 2-point-something billion.
Well, the thing about this particular project is all the improvements, right? The improvements,
Now, they're on federal land.
right. So